Frank Griffin hated disobeying orders almost as much as he hated watching someone die when he could prevent it. The blaring emergency alarms echoed through Frontier Station 9's corridors as he sprinted toward the smoking wreckage in Docking Bay 3. Behind him, Captain Reynolds' voice crackled over the station comms. "Griffin, stand down." Diplomatic protocols require. Frank switched off his comm unit. 20 years as a combat medic had taught him that protocols didn't save lives, action did. The emergency bulkheads had deployed successfully, containing the atmospheric breach caused when the Packard vessel had crashed through the outer docking shields at near relativistic speed. The ship's hull was crumpled like tissue paper, venting strangely-colored vapor through multiple fractures. "Sir, we can't go in there," said Technician Ramirez, grabbing Frank's arm as he punched the override code into the airlock. "The Packards haven't allowed human contact since the Proxima incident. There are 3 treaties. I know the treaties," Frank snapped, shrugging off Ramirez's grip. "I also know life signs when I see them." He pointed to his medical scanner. 2 faint biosignatures pulsed on the display, one rapidly fading, the other erratic but strong. The inner door of the airlock slid open with a hiss, revealing the crushed interior of the Packard vessel. The air inside carried the sharp tang of ozone and something else, a sweet, almost floral scent that Frank recognized from his briefings on xenobiology. Packard pheromonal distress signals. He moved carefully through the twisted metal medical kit clutched tightly in his hand. The Packards were notoriously private about their physiology. Frank knew only what little information had been gathered during that disastrous first contact 2 decades ago. They were insectoid, with translucent exoskeletons and complex respiratory systems poorly suited to human atmospheric conditions. A faint clicking sound drew him to what appeared to be the ship's control center. There, amid shattered control panels and flickering holographic displays, lay a Packard female. Her segmented body was crushed beneath a fallen support beam, iridescent fluid pooling beneath her. In her upper appendages, she clutched a small, pulsating cocoon-like structure. Frank approached slowly, raising his empty hands to show he meant no harm. The Packard's compound eyes swiveled toward him, multifaceted surfaces reflecting his image 1,000 times over. A series of rapid clicks emanated from her mandibles, warning signals, fear responses. Frank had seen enough species die to recognize the universal signs. The cocoon in her arms twitched, and a tiny section parted to reveal another, smaller Packard barely larger than Frank's hand. The infant's translucent exoskeleton revealed organs working frantically inside, struggling to process the human-optimized atmosphere. As the baby Packard caught sight of Frank, it emitted high-pitched, distressed clicking sounds and tried to retreat deeper into its protective cocoon. The mother's clicking changed rhythm. With tremendous effort, she pushed the cocoon toward Frank, her mandibles quivering with what he recognized as determination, overcoming instinctual fear. Her compound eyes fixed on his face one final time before the light within them dimmed forever. Frank's scanner confirmed what he already knew: the mother was gone, but the infant still lived. His medical readouts showed the baby's cellular structure already beginning to degrade from exposure to the station's atmosphere. Behind him, the airlock cycled open. Vance Montgomery, the station's diplomatic officer, stepped through with 2 security personnel. "Dr. Griffin, you violated direct orders and 3 separate interstellar treaties," Montgomery said, his voice cold. "Surrender the Packard infant immediately for proper diplomatic handling." Frank glanced at his scanner. The baby's mother had projected a thought image identifying her as Lara just before Ding had minutes at most before her systems began irreversible shutdown. "She'll die waiting for your diplomatic channels to clear," Frank said, backing toward the secondary exit. "The Packards may fear us, but this mother trusted me with her child." "The Packard Consortium has already dispatched a response fleet," Montgomery warned. This could trigger an interstellar incident. Frank made his decision, clutching the cocoon to his chest and bolting through the corridor toward the medical bay. The tiny Packard inside trembled against his hands, her fear palpable even through the protective membrane. "I don't care if they send their entire fleet," Frank muttered as he sealed the medical bay doors behind him, already preparing his surgical equipment. "No baby dies on my watch, human or otherwise." Frank laid the cocoon gently on the examination table, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The medical bay's automated systems hummed to life as he began scanning the infant's vital signs. "Computer, pull all available data on Packard physiology," he ordered, eyes fixed on the translucent membrane where the tiny being pulsated weakly. The readings flashed red across his monitor: critical metabolic failure imminent. Atmospheric composition incompatible with subject, the computer announced dispassionately. Packard respiratory systems require methane-nitrogen mixture. Current environment toxic to specimen. Frank's mind raced. Initiate emergency protocol Griffin 7. Convert surgical suite to isolation chamber. The medical bay systems whirred in response, transparent barriers sliding into place around the examination table. Frank worked frantically, calibrating gas mixtures while monitoring the infant's deteriorating cellular structure. "Come on, little one," he muttered, extracting a sample of the residual atmosphere trapped in the cocoon's membrane. "Show me what you need." Behind him, the medical bay's entrance rattled security attempting to override his lockdown protocols. Frank ignored it, focusing entirely on the molecular analyzer as it processed the cocoon's atmospheric content. "Analysis complete," the computer announced. "Compound identified. 78.3% nitrogen, 15.2% methane, 4.8% carbon dioxide, trace elements of xenon and sulfur compounds." Frank immediately began programming the environmental controls. "Replicate this mixture exactly. Begin atmospheric replacement in isolation chamber." The banging on the door grew louder. "Griffin, final warning." Dixon's voice boomed through the intercom. "Surrender the alien or we breach." The isolation chamber hissed as it filled with the specialized gas mixture. Frank carefully transferred the cocoon, still monitoring the infant's vitals. For several tense moments, the readings continued to decline, then stabilized barely. "Not good enough," Frank muttered, scanning the crashed vessel's data fragments he'd downloaded during the rescue. The ship's environmental logs revealed subtle variations in atmospheric pressure and composition patterns he recognized from his combat deployments on methane-rich moons. Hours passed as Frank adjusted the mixture incrementally, guided by the infant's biological responses. He scavenged components from throughout the medical bay, constructing a makeshift stasis pod modified to sustain the precise conditions Packard's required. The security team's attempts to breach his barricades grew less frequent as the station command apparently reassessed their approach. At hour 9, Frank noticed something remarkable. Infant's neural patterns had shifted. Initially registering pure distress when in his presence, they now showed bursts of activity corresponding to curiosity. When Frank placed his hand against the transparent barrier, the tiny Packard extended one delicate appendage toward it. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" Frank whispered. The medical bay's translator picked up the infant's soft clicking sounds. "Seeking. Safety. Warmth." Frank checked his neural scanner, then double-checked the readings. According to established xenobiology, Packards possessed an instinctive fear response to human proximity, a biological imperative supposedly hardwired into their species. Yet the infant's readings contradicted this completely. "It's not instinctual," he realized aloud. "It's conditioned." By hour 12, Frank had successfully stabilized the infant's environment. The makeshift chamber now hummed efficiently, its indicators all green. The tiny Packard Lara, as Frank had begun calling her based on the thought image her mother had projected, had begun producing comfort vocalizations when he approached. The medical bay's communication system suddenly activated, bypassing his lockdown. "Frank, it's Eliza Kaminsky." The voice belonged to the station's chief xenobiologist, a colleague he respected, who had been on leave during the incident. "Dixon's letting me come in. Don't shoot, okay?" The auxiliary door slid open, a doctor teeing Dr. Kaminsky. She carried no weapons, only a data pad and scientific equipment. "Well," she said, surveying his improvisational setup, "when they said you'd barricaded yourself in with a packled infant, I expected something more primitive." Her eyes widened as she approached the chamber. "Frank, this is extraordinary work." "She needed help," Frank replied simply, checking Lara's vitals again. "Her mother trusted me." Eliza moved closer, inspecting his modifications to the stasis pod. "You realize what you've done, right? No human has maintained sustained contact with a living packled in 20 years. 3 packled warships just arrived," she continued, her voice lowering. "Their commander is demanding the return of any survivors. Reynolds is trying to defuse the situation, but the Packolds are interpreting your actions as a hostage scenario." Frank's heart made. "Hostage? I'm keeping her alive." "I know that," Eliza said, watching as Lara extended her appendages toward Frank's voice. "And I think we might be witnessing something revolutionary here." She activated her data pad, recording the interaction. "The neural plasticity of infants is universal, it seems. Without prior conditioning, she's forming a positive association with you." Frank nodded, a memory surfacing of his own children living with their mother on Earth after his multiple deployments had fractured their family. The tenderness in his movements as he adjusted Lara's environmental controls belied his typically gruff demeanor. "Reynolds is showing the Packold commander live footage of your treatment," Eliza explained, still recording. "He's allowing a Packold medical team to board and verify the infant's condition." A notification flashed on Frank's terminal station's central computer had completed its analysis of the data fragments from the crashed vessel. He opened the file, scanning the results. "This wasn't an accident," he said, voice hushed. "According to these logs, the mother, her name was Nairade, deliberately set course for this station." Eliza moved to his side, examining the data. "She was a scientist," Frank continued, "working on improving Packlet-human relations, against her government's wishes." The neural scan of Lara's cocoon revealed something else: density patterns that didn't correspond to biological tissue. "This cocoon," Frank said, pointing to the scan, "it's not just a protective shell. It contains data, massive amounts of it stored in the auxiliary neural cluster." Eliza gasped softly. "Packled neural data transmission, they use it to preserve critical information." "Frank, that infant is carrying information her mother thought worth dying for." The station's alert system activated, announcing the imminent docking of a Packled shuttle. Frank looked at Lara, now sleeping peacefully in her chamber, then at the data revealing her mother's final, desperate mission. "We have 20 minutes before they reach the medical bay," he said, decision forming. "Help me understand what's in that data before I decide who to trust with it." Frank's fingers flew across the terminal, extracting the crucial fragments from the neural data stored in Lara's cocoon. The information scrolled across his screen: complex genetic markers, molecular formulas, and research notes embedded in Packled script that the computer struggled to translate. "This is extraordinary," Eliza whispered, leaning closer to examine the data. "Naira wasn't just any scientist, she was pioneering neuroplasticity research." Frank nodded, his focus unwavering as he isolated a subset of data related specifically to Lara's medical requirements. "I'm extracting only what we need for her care. The rest stays untouched." The computer flashed a completion notice, and Frank removed the data crystal, securing it in his lab coat pocket. The remaining information would stay embedded in the cocoon's neural matrix, exactly as Naira had intended. Frank. Eliza's voice grew serious as she checked the station's security feed. The Packard delegation has docked. 3 medical personnel, heavily escorted. Reynolds is meeting them now. The security feed showed the docking bay where Captain Reynolds, Montgomery, and Security Chief Dixon stood at attention. The airlock cycled open, revealing 3 Packard physicians. Each activated personal atmosphere converters that enveloped them in a faint green misportable environmental bubbles that allowed them to function in human standard atmospheres. Frank studied their leader, noting the elaborate markings on his exoskeleton that signified senior medical status. That's their chief physician. Packards don't exchange names with outsiders, but their hierarchy is visible in their markings. What's our play here? Eliza asked, watching Frank's face carefully. Frank looked at Lara, who had curled into a resting position within her chamber. Her tiny appendages twitched occasionally as she dreamed a behavior he'd documented over the past hours. They'll be less stressed without a human present during their initial examination, he said. I'll observe from the adjacent lab. You stay with Lara, maintain a professional distance. You'll respect your scientific credentials. Eliza nodded. And the data? For now, we say nothing about Naira's research, Frank replied. Let's see how they react to Lara first. Frank retreated to the observation room, adjusting the one-way viewing panel to provide a clear sightline into the medical bay. He activated the audio feed just as the medical bay doors opened, admitting the 3 Packard physicians. The leader, whose markings identified him as senior physician, approached Lara's chamber with measured steps. His compound eyes flicked rapidly, taking in every detail of Frank's improvised life support system. The 2 junior physicians flanked him, their appendages delicately unpacking diagnostic equipment. This infant requires transfer to proper Packard medical facilities immediately, the senior physician announced, his translator rendering his clicks into flat, emotionless standard English. Eliza kept her distance, hands visible doctor at her sides. Dr. Griffin stabilized her condition using atmospheric compounds extracted from the cocoon membrane. Her vitals have strengthened over the past 12 hours. The senior physician made a dismissive gesture, compound eyes never leaving the chamber. Human medical practices are primitive. Our methods. He stopped abruptly as his scanning device interfaced with Frank's medical terminal. The readouts flashed across the screen: cellular regeneration rates, neural activity, metabolic processes, all showing marked improvement from the critical state they had been in when Frank first placed Lara in the chamber. The 3 Packards exchanged rapid clicks too subtle for the translator to catch. I am Senior Physician Krall, the leader said suddenly, surprising Frank with the voluntary disclosure of his name. These readings require verification. Krall adjusted his scanner, running it slowly over Lara's incubation chamber. The junior physicians huddled closer, their clicking growing more animated as they compared readings. Frank watched as Krall's posture changed, a subtle shift in his abdominal segments that indicated surprise or confusion. The physician repeated his scan, focusing on specific portions of Lara's tiny body. Where is the human doctor who constructed this chamber? Krall asked, still not looking directly at Eliza. He's in the observation room, Eliza replied. We thought your team might be more comfortable conducting your examination without human proximity triggering stress responses. Krall's compound eyes swiveled toward the observation window. Though Frank knew the Packard couldn't see through the one-way barrier, he felt exposed under that multifaceted gaze. Krall turned to one of his companions and made a sharp clicking sound. The junior physician immediately deactivated one of several communication devices attached to his exoskeleton. Frank recognized the gesture. Krall had just cut off external monitoring of their conversation. Computer, what's happening on the bridge? Frank asked quietly. The observation room display split, showing Reynolds engaged in conversation with a Packard commander who remained aboard his vessel. The commander's exoskeleton bore the distinctive scarring of military rank. "Commander Strix demands immediate transfer of the infant," Reynolds was saying, his voice calm despite the tension evident in his posture. "I've provided evidence that the vessel crashed due to engine failure, not human intervention. Packled young belong with packled caretakers," Strix replied, his translator rendering his clicks into harsh, clipped tones. "Further delay will be considered hostile action." Frank switched his attention back to the medical bay where Krall was completing his examination. The senior physician had disconnected another communication device, effectively isolating his team DRM external monitoring. "Dr. Kaminsky," Krall said, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions in his clicking speech, "I request private communication with your station's captain." Eliza glanced toward the observation window, receiving Frank's subtle nod. "I'll relay your request immediately." As Eliza stepped aside to contact Reynolds, Frank's terminal beeped with an incoming transmission. Reynolds was patching him into a secure channel. "Griffin, stay where you are," Reynolds said quietly. "I'm bringing Krall's feed into your observation room only." "Dixon has detected unusual transmissions from Montgomery's quarters-encrypted packets on non-standard channels. We're keeping him out of this for now." The screen split again, now showing Reynolds in his private office rather than the bridge. A moment later, Krall appeared in the adjacent feed. "Captain Reynolds," Krall began, "I must speak with complete confidentiality regarding the infant." Reynolds nodded. "This channel is secure, Doctor." "I knew Naira," Krall said, his clicking suddenly taking on a more natural rhythm without the need for formal posturing. "We worked together before she left our research institute. What your doctor has discovered in the infant's genetic structure confirms what I suspected. Naira continued her research despite the consortium's prohibition." Frank leaned forward, absorbing every word. "The infant has been modified," Krall continued. "Her neural pathways lack the standard fear response to human proximity. This is revolutionary and dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Reynolds asked. "Elements within our government consider such modifications heretical," Krall explained. "If Commander Strix discovers this, he has authority to terminate the infant as genetically corrupted." Frank's hands clenched involuntarily. Reynolds's expression remained neutral, though his eyes hardened. "What are you proposing, Doctor?" Reynolds asked. "The infant requires specia, Doctor. Ed care that, I must admit, your Dr. Griffin has provided admirably," Krall replied. "I will certify that her unique medical needs require her to remain Doctor, here temporarily under the guardianship of Dr. Griffin, whose equipment is now calibrated to her specific requirements." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "That's an unprecedented arrangement." "There are those among us who share Naira's vision," Krall said. "This infant may represent our first real chance at overcoming the biological barrier that has kept our species isolated for generations. But we need time to prepare for her proper integration into our society under protected status. And Commander Strix will accept my medical certification," Krall replied, though his posture suggested less certainty than Dr. Word's. "It is his duty." Reynolds nodded slowly. "Dr. Griffin, your thoughts?" Frank touched the communicator, making his presence known. "I'll do it. Lara stays here under my care." "Lara?" Krall's compound eyes blinked rapidly. "Her mother projected a thought image identifying her as Lara before she died," Frank explained. "It seemed right to use the name she chose." Krall was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Naira always appreciated human naming conventions. She would approve." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Dixon. "Captain, 3 additional Packled warships just appeared at the edge of our system." Frank looked through the observation window at Lara's chamber. The infant had awakened and was extending her appendages toward where he stood, as if somehow sensing his presence despite the barrier between them. In his private channel, Krall's posture changed dramatically rigid with alarm. Strix must have received new orders from the consortium. This is no longer a recovery mission. Reynolds's face hardened. They're coming for the research data, and potentially to eliminate any evidence of genetic modification, Krall added, his clicking rapid and distressed. Captain Reynolds, we have very little time. Strix must choose between his orders and what is right. Frank looked at Lara, still reaching toward him through the observation window, then at the data crystal in his pocket containing the extracted medical information. In 12 hours, this infant had upended everything he thought he knew about Packolds. Now her very existence had become the focal point of a potential interstellar conflict. Reynolds, Frank said, his decision made, I'm coming to the bridge. There's something Strix needs to see. Reynolds, Frank said, his decision made, I'm coming to the bridge. There's something Strix needs to see. Frank secured the data crystal in an inner pocket and moved quickly toward the door. As he exited, he glanced back at Lara, who tracked his movement with unexpected awareness. Watch over her, he told Eliza. If anything changes in her vitals, alert me immediately. The station's corridor lights shifted to amber, the universal indicator of elevated security status. Frank's comm unit buzzed with an incoming station-wide alert from Captain Reynolds. All personnel, 3 additional Packold vessels have entered our system and established formation around the station. Maintain normal operations but prepare for possible emergency protocols. This is not a drill. Frank quickened his pace. By the time he reached the bridge, the situation had escalated further. The main view screen displayed a tactical readout showing 4 Packold warships and 3 more emerging from hyperspace to join them. 7 warships for 1 infant, Reynolds muttered as Frank entered. The captain stood at the central command console, his face illuminated by the red tactical displays. That's quite the recovery team. Frank approached quietly, noting the tense posture of the bridge crew. At the communications station, Lieutenant Chen worked frantically to maintain open channels with the Packold fleet. Commander Strix is requesting permission to board the station, Chen reported. He wants to inspect the infant and our medical facilities personally. Reynolds considered this for only a moment. Grant his request. Establish security protocol Delta for the duration of his visit. Frank stepped forward. Captain, if I may, you think this is a bad idea? Reynolds asked. No, Frank replied. I think it's our only option. Strix needs to see Lara for himself. Reynolds nodded slowly. Meet me in my ready room in 5 minutes. Lieutenant Chen, inform Commander Strix his request is approved. Dixon, I want a full security detail on standby, and I want every movement of our guests monitored. Security Chief Dixon acknowledged the order with a curt nod. Already on it, Captain. And Sertho's encrypted transmissions from Montgomery's quarters. They've increased in frequency since the arrival of the additional Packold vessels. Reynolds's eyes narrowed. Keep on it. I want to know what he's sending and to whom. In the captain's ready room, Frank laid out his plan quickly. We need to move Naira's research data somewhere secure, he explained. If Strix is coming with official orders to eliminate evidence of genetic modification, that data will be his primary target after Lara. Reynolds studied the data crystal Frank had placed on the desk. Where do you suggest? There's a maintenance access panel beneath the medical bay's primary diagnostic terminal. The environmental regulation systems run underneath Perfect Place to hide something small like this. Reynolds picked up the crystal, examining it briefly before returning it to Frank. Do it. What about Lara? I want her to remain exactly where she is, Frank said. If we try to hide her, it only reinforces the idea that we have something to conceal. Besides, I've modified that chamber specifically for her needs. Moving her now could be dangerous. Dr. Reed, Dixon will coordinate security protocols with you and Dr. Kaminsky. I want you both present during Strix's inspection. Frank nodded. One more thing, Captain. The Terra Prima Manifesto Montgomery was reading in the mess hall. It wasn't just casual interest, was it? Reynolds's expression hardened. Dixon thinks he may have been involved with them for years. We're investigating now. Terra Prima believes human expansion should exclude alien integration, Frank said. A breakthrough in packled human relations would be exactly the kind of development they'd want to prevent. All the more reason to secure that data, Reynolds replied. Go prepare the medical bay, Doctor. Our guests will arrive in 30 minutes. Back in the medical bay, Frank worked quickly with Eliza to prepare for the inspection. They recalibrated Lara's environmental controls, ensuring every reading was optimal. Frank knelt beneath the diagnostic terminal, prying open the maintenance panel with practiced movements. Environmental regulation system, Frank explained as he carefully placed the data crystal in a small protective container. The heat exchangers will mask any scans trying to detect the crystal's signature. Eliza watched the door nervously. You think they'll search that thoroughly? I'm not taking chances. Frank secured the panel and stood up. How's our patient? Active, Eliza reported, nodding toward the incubation chamber where Lara had unfurled all her appendages and was exploring the limits of her space. Her neural activity increased after you left. I think she might be looking for you. Frank approached the chamber. Lara immediately oriented toward him, her sensory appendages extending in his direction. He placed his hand against the transparent barrier, and she pressed her tiny limbs against the other side. She can't possibly be imprinting on you already, Eliza said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Naira's modifications might have accelerated her cognitive development, Frank replied. We're in uncharted territory here. The medical bay doors slid open as Senior Physician Krall entered, accompanied by his 2 assistants. Commander Strix has docked, he announced. He brings a full security complement. Frank straightened. Let's hope they've been properly briefed on human proximity protocols. They have not, Krall replied, his clicking translated into a tone of concern. Strix chose warriors specifically conditioned to tolerate human presence. This doctor, Spection, is unusual. The station's communication system chimed. Dr. Griffin, came Dixon's voice. Commander Strix's party is approaching the medical bay. Captain Reynolds requests your presence at the reception point. Frank gave Lara's chamber one final check, then nodded to Eliza. Monitor her vitals continuously. Any unusual readings, contact me immediately. Frank met Reynolds and Dixon at the security checkpoint leading to the medical section. Commander Strix approached from the opposite direction, flanked by 4 heavily armed packled guards. Unlike the medical personnel, Strix wore no atmospheric converter. His exoskeleton bristled with military insignia, the surface gleaming under the station lights. As he drew nearer to the humans, a faint sheen appeared on Strix's exoskeletonstrous pheromones secreting involuntarily. The station's ventilation system immediately increased output, struggling to filter the acrid compounds. Commander Strix, Reynolds greeted formally. Frontier Station 9 acknowledges your authority in this matter and will provide full cooperation during your inspection. Strix's compound eyes fixed briefly on each human before Dr. T-Ling on Frank. You are the human who maintains the infant's life support. Dr. Frank Griffin, yes, Frank confirmed. I've stabilized her condition using atmospheric compounds extracted from her mother's cocoon membrane. Take me to her, Strix ordered, his translated voice flat and mechanical. The medical bay doors parted, revealing Eliza monitoring Lara's chamber. The infant had positioned herself at the transparent section facing the door, as if anticipating their arrival. When she spotted Frank, her appendages waved in what appeared to be recognition. Strix halted abruptly at the threshold. His exoskeleton released another pulse of stress pheromones as he observed the infant's reaction to human presence. Impossible, he clicked, the translator struggling to convey his disbelief. Frank stepped forward. Commander, if I may explain the specialized equipment, approach the chamber, Strix interrupted. I wish to observe the infant's response. Frank complied, walking slowly to Lara's incubation pod. As expected, she reached toward him, emitting soft chirping sounds that Crawl had identified as contentment vocalizations. The monitoring systems displayed her stable vitals, no fear response, no stress indicators. Strix's compound eyes rapidly flicked between Frank and Lara, analyzing the interaction. Frank recognized the cognitive dissonance in the commander's posture. Everything Strix had been conditioned to believe about human-Packard interactions was being contradicted before his eyes. Crawl seized the moment. He stepped forward with his medical scanner, displaying Lara's neural patterns. "Commander, my examination has revealed unexpected neurological development in the infant. These patterns suggest an adaptation to human proximity that could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies relations." Adaptation, Strix clicked sharply, or genetic tampering. The trauma of the crash, followed by immediate human medical intervention during her most neurologically vulnerable period, appears to have triggered developmental pathways normally suppressed in our Dr. Sci's. Crawl explained carefully, avoiding direct mention of deliberate modification. Dr. Griffin's medical techniques may have inadvertently created a biological bridge between our species. Frank moved to the diagnostic terminal, activating displays that showed the specialized environmental controls he had constructed. "Commander, I've developed precise atmospheric mixtures and nutrient solutions calibrated specifically to Lara's physiology. Moving her now, during this critical developmental stage, could reverse the progress we've made." Strix approached the chamber, maintaining distance from the humans but drawing closer to Lara. The infant oriented toward him, showing no fear toward this new Packard presence either. "She displays none of our natural caution," Strix observed, his clicking quiet and contemplative. The moment of connection was shattered by an urgent station-wide alert. Red emergency lights pulsed as Dixon's voice came over the comm system. "Security breach in progress. Communications blackout detected in sections A through D. Multiple bulkheads sealing without authorization. All personnel implement emergency protocols immediately." Dixon's private channel to Reynolds activated immediately after. "Captain, it's Montgomery. He's blown his cover and locked down half the station. Worse, you have detected an armed maintenance drone entering the ventilation system. Explosive signature confirmed. It's headed for the medical bay." The station sensors registered the unauthorized drone movement, triggering automated warnings throughout the facility. Frank processed this information in an instant, his focus narrowing to a single priority. "We need to evacuate Lara now," he announced, already moving toward the incubation chamber. "Eliza, help me disconnect the primary feeds. We're converting to portable life support." Without hesitation, Frank began detaching Lara's chamber from its fixed support systems. His hands moved with surgical precision, disconnecting tubes and wires while Eliza prepared the portable power unit they used for patient transfers. "What is happening?" Strix demanded, his security detail moving into defensive positions around the medical bay. "Someone has armed a drone with explosives," Reynolds explained tersely. "They're targeting this location, likely targeting you and the infant." Frank completed the conversion, connecting Lara's chamber to the portable unit. The incubation pod hummed as it switched power sources, maintaining the precise environmental conditions Lara needed to survive. A grinding noise emanated from the ventilation shaft above them. Dixon and his security team burst through the medical bay doors, weapons drawn. "Drone breach imminent," Dixon shouted. "Take cover." The ventilation grate exploded outward as the armed maintenance drone dropped into the medical bay. Its optical sensors immediately locked onto the gathered group, explosive payload primed for detonation. In a movement that defied generations of Packard conditioning, Commander Strix positioned himself between the explosive device and Lara's incubation pod. Frank pulled the portable chamber back, shielding it with his body while Dixon raised his weapon. The security forces moved with perfect synchronization. Dixon fired a precision electromagnetic pulse that struck the drone's central processor, while one of Strix's guards lunged forward with remarkable speed, extracting the explosive component and containing it in a specialized field generator. Explosive neutralized, the Packard guard reported, the containment field glowing blue around the removed detonation package. Montgomery, Dixon said, lowering his weapon. He's barricaded himself in Communications Hub 3. We've got him cornered, but he's still accessing systems. Reynolds's comm unit activated. Captain, this is Lieutenant Chen. Montgomery has locked himself in with command override codes. He's attempting to purge the main computer core. Dixon organized his security team. We move now. Packard Security, we could use your assistance if Commander Strix permits. Strix, still processing his own unexpected protective reaction toward Lara, nodded sharply. 2 of my guards will accompany you. The others remain here to secure the infant. As Dixon's team departed, the station lighting flickered ominously. Frank monitored Lara's portable chamber, confirming its independent power source remained stable. What does Montgomery hope to accomplish? Eliza asked. Terra Prima has one objective: prevent alien integration with human society, Reynolds replied grimly. Killing both Strix and Lara while framing Frank would achieve exactly that. Frank checked the sealed maintenance panel where Naira's research data remained hidden. His failed attempt here means he'll go to his backup plan. We need to. An ear-splitting alarm suddenly blared throughout the station. On the medical bay monitors, Frank watched as all Packard life signs across the station suddenly spiked into critical ranges. Neural disruptor. Kral collapsed to his knees, his exoskeleton trembling violently. Designed to trigger our fear response. Maximum intensity. The remaining Packard guards fell to the floor, their limbs spasming uncontrollably. Commander Strix staggered, gripping the edge of a medical console as his compound eyes rapidly lost focus. Only Lara remained unaffected in her chamber, her modified neurological structure immune to the targeted attack. Frank's mind raced, connecting the pieces of Naira's research data he had studied. The neural stabilizing compound, he said suddenly. Eliza, help me synthesize itno. Frank rushed to a storage cabinet, his movements precise despite the chaos. The neural stabilizing compound Naira developed, it's our only chance to counteract the disruptor. Eliza joined him at the synthesis station. How much do we need? Enough for Strix and the guards. Kral's notes indicate a 10 cc dose should neutralize the effects. Frank's fingers flew across the medical synthesizer's controls, programming the molecular structure from memory. The Packard commander's body convulsed violently as the neural disruptor's effects intensified. His exoskeleton released waves of stress pheromones that threatened to overwhelm the ventilation system. Work faster, Reynolds urged, positioning herself at the door with her sidearm drawn. If Montgomery regained system access, we could lose atmospheric controls next. The synthesizer hummed, producing a pale blue solution that Frank immediately loaded into an aerosol dispenser. He approached Strix first, administering the compound through the commander's respiratory intake valves. Within seconds, the violent tremors subsided. Additional doses, Strix managed, his translator struggling to convert his weakened clicks. My guards. Frank and Eliza moved quickly among the fallen Packard security team, delivering the stabilizing compound. One by one, they regained control of their motor functions, though their exoskeletons still gleamed with stress secretions. Strix rose shakily to his feet, compound eyes refocusing. This attack, it targets Packard physiology specifically. Montgomery must have obtained classified research on Packard neural structures, Reynolds said. That level of bioweapon development violates at least 6 interspecies treaties. Frank checked Lara's vitals, confirming what he'd suspected. She's completely unaffected. Naira's modifications shielded her neural pathways from the disruptor frequency. The station's communication system crackled with Dixon's voice. "Medical Bay, report status. We've neutralized Montgomery, but not before he initiated a data purge. Station systems are rebooting." "Packard personnel stabilized," Frank responded. "The infant is secure." Strix approached Lara's chamber, studying her with new intensity. This infant survived what should have incapacitated any Packard. The modifications are more extensive than reported. Frank tensed, preparing to defend his actions, but Strix continued before he could speak. Such adaptations could save Packard lives if properly studied. The commander turned to face Frank directly. "Your intervention prevented a diplomatic catastrophe today. Had I died here alongside this infant, war would have been inevitable." The medical bay doors slid open as Dixon entered with his security team. "Area secure. Montgomery is in custody and the neural disruptor has been disabled." "Commander Strix," Reynolds addressed the Packard leader formally. "What happens now is your decision. Terra Prima intended to drive our species apart. We can choose a different path." Strix's compound eyes shifted between Lara's chamber and the humans. "Offie Doctor, L records will show that the infant perished from injuries sustained in the crash. Unofficially, Dr. Griffin will continue his medical monitoring under the supervision of Senior Physician Krall, who will remain assigned to this station." Frank exhaled slowly, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. "This arrangement will remain classified at the highest level," Strix continued. "If the infant's existence became widely known before we understand these modifications fully, extremists on both sides would react. Predictably." "Thank you, Commander," Frank said, "Qui Doctor." Strix made a gesture Frank hadn't seen before, something between a salute and a bow. "Do not thank me yet, Dr. Griffin. You now bear responsibility for the first Packard in history to develop without our natural caution toward humans. The consequences cannot be predicted." 6 months later, Frank adjusted the atmospheric regulator in his quarters as Lara chirped excitedly from her side of the transparent barrier. What had begun as a medical necessity had evolved into something unprecedented, a human Packard shared living space. "Yes, I see you," Frank said, smiling as Lara pressed her tiny limbs against the divider. "I'm coming in now." He stepped through the transition chamber, allowing the specialized filters to remove oxygen from his clothing before entering Lara's methane-nitrogen environment. Her transparent exoskeleton now displayed faint iridescent patterns that shifted with her movements, a sign of healthy juvenile development. "FRR rank," Lara clicked, combining Packard vocalization with an approximation of human speech. "Playtime." Her ability to speak English, even in this rudimentary form, still amazed him. According to Krall, no Packard had ever willingly learned human language before. "Yes, playtime," Frank agreed, settling on the floor beside her collection of P-Doctor, less complex three-dimensional structures that she disassembled and rebuilt with increasing speed. The door chimed and Dr. Eliza Kaminsky entered through the human atmosphere side. "How's our star pupil today?" "Lisa." Lara clicked excitedly, abandoning her puzzles to approach the transparent barrier separating them. Eliza held up a data pad. "Her neural scans from yesterday are remarkable. Her cognitive development is accelerating beyond all predicted models. She's solving problems designed for Packard children 3 times her age." Frank watched as Lara returned to her puzzles, her tiny limbs manipulating components with surprising dexterity. It's not just cognitive. Her motor skills are advancing faster than standard Packard development charts indicate they should. "Naira's modifications might have extended beyond fear response suppression," Eliza suggested, her voice lowered. "I've been analyzing the remaining encrypted data from her research logs. There's evidence she believed Packard evolution had stagnated due to their self-imposed isolation." Frank's comm unit beeped. "Griffin here." "Doctor," Captain Reynolds' voice came through. Senior Physician Krall requests your presence in the diplomatic section. We've established a new communication channel with a moderate faction in the Packard Consortium. I'll be right there, Frank replied, giving Lara a gentle pat on her exoskeleton. Eliza will stay with you, okay? Frank, come back. Lara clicked, her newly developed speech patterns expressing concern despite the limitations of her vocal structures. I'll be back soon, he assured her. Keep working on your puzzles. The diplomatic section had expanded significantly over the past 6 months. What had once been a rarely-used conference room now housed sophisticated communication equipment and translation systems. Earth Central Command had upgraded Frontier Station 9's status from remote outpost to strategic diplomatic hub following the establishment of limited communication channels with moderate Packard factions. Krall stowed Doctor, before a communications display, his exoskeleton polished to a formal shine. He acknowledged Frank with a respectful gesture. Doctor. Griffin, Commander Strix has transmitted concerning information through secure channels. The automated sensor logs from his vessel have reached the Intelligence Directorate. Frank felt his stomach tighten. They know about Lara. Not officially, Krall clicked. But an analyst named Morden has identified discrepancies between Strix's report claiming Lara's death and the sensor data showing a living Packard infant in human care. Reynolds joined them, her expression grim. Rather than immediately reporting this contradiction, Morden has begun a covert investigation. He suspects a conspiracy involving Strix, Krall, and potentially other Packard officials sympathetic to improved human relations. We need to implement additional security measures, Security Chief Dixon said, entering the room with a data pad displaying station schematics. I've been recalled to Earth to assist with a counterintelligence operation targeting Terra Prima cells. Montgomery's connections triggered a broader investigation into extremist infiltration of diplomatic services. Frank processed this information, his military background immediately assessing potential threats and responses. How long will you be gone? Uncertain. Weeks, possibly months. Dixon handed Frank a small device. This is an emergency beacon linked directly to both station security and a rapid response team from the nearest Earth Fleet outpost. I'm assigning Sergeant Ramirez to personally oversee Lara's protection during my absence. Frank slipped the beacon into his pocket. We should prepare a contingency plan for evacuation if necessary. Already underway, Eliza said from the doorway. She entered the room, carefully sealing it behind her. I've registered a long-range medical transport vessel under my academic credentials. We're modifying it with Packard environmental systems and stocking it with supplies sufficient for an extended journey to a neutral system. Frank nodded, grateful for her foresight. Lara, currently with Specialist Nira, Eliza assured him. She's secure. Reynolds activated a secure display. There's something else you should see, Frank. We've detected unusual reassignments of Packard security personnel from Commander Strix's border station to Intelligence Directorate operations. Strix believes they're assembling a team for a potential extraction mission. The display showed the movements of Packard vessels near their sector, including an unmarked ship that had recently departed from a Packard military installation. How much time do we have? Frank asked. Krall's clicking became rapid, a sign of concern. Unknown, but there is another development you must be aware of. Specialists Nira and Vix have completed their analysis of Lara's latest neural scans. They believe she has entered a programmed developmental stage that Nira designed to activate once she reached sufficient cognitive maturity. Frank's comm unit chimed with an urgent alert from his quarters. Lara's biosigns showed a dramatic spike in neural activity. We need to get to Lara now, he said, already moving toward the door. When they reached Frank's quarters, Specialist Nira stood beside Lara's atmospheric chamber, recording data as the young Packold's exoskeleton pulsed with previously unseen bioluminescent patterns. "It began 17 minutes ago," Nira explained, her clicking translated into terse, scientific language. "The patterns appear to be a form of neural mapping expressing through the exoskeleton's transparent layers." Frank entered the Packold atmospheric zone, approaching Lara cautiously. Her compound eyes tracked his movement with unusual intensity. "Lara, can you tell me how you feel?" he asked gently. The young Packold reached toward him, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing in complex sequences. "Father, not afraid. Lara, not afraid." Her English was suddenly clearer, more articulate than ever before. "Others coming, very afraid, very angry." Frank froze at the unexpected coherence of her speech and the ominous warning. Before he could respond, the station's alert system activated. "Attention all personnel," came Reynolds' voice. "Unknown vessel approaching station perimeter. Security protocols initiated. All sections proceed to condition yellow." Frank met Eliza's eyes through the atmospheric barrier. "Begin evacuation preparations," he said quietly. "It's time." The station's long-range sensors displayed additional information on the main screen: 3 Earth Fleet cruisers on an intercept course with the unknown Packold vessel. The lead ship was identified as the EFS Vigilant under Admiral Helena Takahashi's command. As Frank gathered Lara's essential supplies, he realized the fragile peace they had built over 6 careful months now hung in precarious balance. Whatever happened in the next 24 hours would determine not just Lara's fate, but potentially the future of Packlet-human relations for generations to come. Frank secured the last nutrient tube to Lara's portable atmospheric pod as the station alert continued to pulse through his quarters. The unmarked Packold vessel had bypassed standard approach protocols, making a direct path toward docking bay 17. "Evasion pattern 3, Frank instructed, activating the pod's camouflage systems. The unit's exterior shifted to mimic standard medical equipment, specifically a portable dialysis unit common on frontier stations. Lara's exoskeleton pulsed with intensifying bioluminescent patterns, creating ripples of blue-green light that cast strange shadows across the room. She pressed her appendages against the transparent section of her pod. "6 minds, very cold," she clicked in Packold language before transitioning to English with startling clarity. "They not feel fear like others, they come for me." Frank froze momentarily. Lara's linguistic abilities had improved dramatically IDRHE last few hours, alongside these new bioluminescent displays. Whatever developmental stage Nira had programmed was advancing rapidly. "Doctor." "Griffin," Eliza's voice came through his comm. "Evacuation protocol Theta is active. The transport in maintenance bay C7 is initializing launch sequence." "Copy that. We're moving now." Frank attached the pod to his back via the specialized harness they designed for exactly this contingency. The weight distributed evenly across his shoulders, leaving his hands free. "Reynolds to Griffin," the captain's INCE cut in. "Be advised, security sensors show multiple access breaches in Section 14. Routing you through Maintenance Corridor K." Frank moved to his quarters' maintenance access panel, pressing his palm against the biometric scanner. The wall slid back to reveal a narrow service tunnel, dimly lit with backup power strips. "Remember what we practiced," Frank told Lara as he secured the final connection. "Complete silence until we reach the transport. Your new abilities might help us, but they might also make you detectable to other Packolds." Lara's bioluminescent patterns dimmed to a faint glow in acknowledgement. Frank entered the maintenance tunnel, hunched slightly under the weight of Lara's pod. The air smelled of lubricant and recycled oxygen, carrying the faint metallic taste common to station environmental systems. He navigated the narrow passage by memory, reviewing the evacuation route they drilled repeatedly over the past months. "Left junction ahead," Lara whispered, her voice barely audible through the pod's communication system. Frank paused. "How do you know that?" I feel them, two at right junction, moving fast. Frank switched direction without questioning further, taking the left passage despite it not being part of their planned route. The maintenance corridors narrowed further, forcing him to sidestep with Lara's pod held carefully to avoid impact with the walls. In the station's Tactical Operations Center, Captain Reynolds stood before a holographic display showing the unmarked Packard vessel now docked at a secondary commercial port. The infiltration team had bypassed quarantine, their falsified medical clearance codes circumventing the first layer of station security. "Helena, we have uninvited guests approaching," Reynolds said, addressing Admiral Takahashi through the newly established secure channel. The Admiral's image flickered on the main view screen, the EFS Vigilance bridge visible behind her. "We're tracking them," Admiral Takahashi responded. 3 additional Packard vessels just dropped out of FTL at the system's Edge official consortium military designations, Commander Strix's border patrol craft among them. Reynolds nodded grimly. Strix's involvement complicates matters. He could be coming to assist or to eliminate witnesses. Either way, we're moving to intercept. The Perseus and Theseus are assuming defensive positions around your station. Prepare for potential evacuation scenarios. At the station's emergency command post, Security Chief Dixon coordinated with Sergeant Ramirez, having returned unexpectedly aboard the Vigilant. Dixon's intelligence mission to Earth had uncovered evidence of deeper Packard political divisions than previously understood. "Their operatives are using tactical overlays," Dixon explained, showing Ramirez specialized detection equipment. "Standard weapons won't penetrate. Recalibrate to frequency 17.3. "Sir," Ramirez acknowledged, distributing the modified weapons to her security team. "We've established a perimeter around Maintenance Bay C7. Dixon checked the secure tracker showing Frank's position. "They're taking an alternate route. Direct 2 teams to junctions K7 and K9. Frank navigated through the increasingly narrow passageways, the distant sounds of station operations giving way to an unnatural silence. Twice, he changed direction based on Lara's whispered warnings, avoiding Morden's search teams with uncanny precision. "How are you tracking them?" Frank asked during a brief pause at an intersection. "I feel their minds," Lara replied. "Different from other Packards, no fear but cold purpose." Frank absorbed this information as they continued moving. Naira's modifications clearly extended beyond fear response suppression. Lara was developing empathic abilities that no one had anticipated, abilities that now provided them with critical tactical advantages. They reeked Doctor. A maintenance access hatch labeled C7. Frank pressed his palm against the scanner, and the door slid open to reveal the waiting transport vessel. Dr. Kaminsky was already aboard, her fingers moving rapidly across the navigation console. "Final launch preparations nearly complete," she reported, not looking up from her work. "Atmospheric stabilizers are online." Frank moved to disconnect Lara's pod from his harness when Security Chief Dixon stepped from the shadows, accompanied by Sergeant Ramirez and 4 heavily armed security officers. "The evacuation plan has changed," Dixon informed Frank. "Admiral Takahashi doesn't believe the transport will make it past the Packard vessels at the system's edge. We're moving you and Lara to the EFS Vigilant instead." Before Frank could respond, Lara's environmental pod erupted with urgent bioluminescent patterns. "Danger close," she clicked urgently. "The cold mines found us." A metallic groan echoed through the maintenance bay as the main doors buckled inward. Dixon and Ramirez Emeti Doctor Lai directed their security team behind reinforced barricades, weapons aimed at the failing entry point. "Get to the secondary exit," Dixon ordered Frank and Dr. Kaminsky. "Doctor, we'll hold them here." Frank hesitated, his military instincts urging him to join the defense, but Lara's safety took precedence. He moved toward the indicated exit, Dr. Kaminsky following closely behind with essential medical equipment. The main doors gave way with a catastrophic breach. 2 Packled operatives entered the bay, their exoskeletons covered with matte black tactical overlays that masked their biological signatures. They carried specialized weapons Frank had never seen before, not the standard Packled defense implements, but something far more sophisticated. Dixon's security team opened fire, their modified weapons striking the Packled operatives with precision. The energy pulses should have incapacitated any standard target, but the tactical overlays absorbed the impacts with minimal effect. The operatives advanced methodically, firing their weapons with uncommon accuracy for Packleds. One security officer collapsed, his body convulsing as neural disruptors overwhelmed his nervous system. Another took cover behind a cargo container, but the Packled weapons adjusted trajectory, curving around obstacles to find their targets. "Fall back," Dixon ordered, recognizing the tactical disadvantage. "Defensive position Beta." As the security team retreated to secondary positions, a third figure entered through the breach. Unlike the operatives with their uniform tactical overlays, this Packled's exoskeleton covering featured subtle differentiations, marking him as their leader. Intelligence Director Morden surveyed the bay with compound eyes that betrayed no emotion, a biological impossibility for standard Packleds when confronted with humans at close range. Morden spotted Frank and Lara retreating toward the secondary exit. With deliberate precision, he raised a specialized device and activated it, directing the beam toward Lara's environmental pod. The effect was immediate. Lara's body convulsed inside the pod, her bioluminescent patterns flaring with unprecedented intensity. Frank moved to shield her, but the light grew to blinding proportions, engulfing the entire maintenance bay in coruscating waves of blue-green energy. Frank raised his arm to protect his eyes, feeling Lara's pod vibrate against his back with increasing force. When the light receded enough for visibility to return, he felt an unexpected wave of emotion wash over him, not his own feelings, but something projected outward from Lara's pod. The sensation carried no fear, no pain, but rather a profound sense of belonging and connection. Images flickered through Frank's mind. The quiet moments reading to Lara in their shared quarters, Eliza teaching her linguistic patterns, Captain Reynolds watching over them both with protective vigilance. These memories carried emotional weight far beyond their contenthy, formed the foundation of Lara's understanding of her place in the universe. The Packled operatives stopped their advance, their weapons lowering involuntarily. Their compound eyes displayed visible confusion, the tactical overlays unable to shield them from Lara's empathic broadcast. Only Morden maintained partial control, raising his weapon toward Frank with visible effort. Before he could fire, the tertiary access door slid open. Commander Strix entered the bay with Captain Reynolds and Senior Physician Krall beside him. Strix moved with decisive purpose, raising his own weapon and firing a precision shot that struck Morden's disruptor, disabling it instantly. "Intelligence Director," Strix addressed Morden formally, "by authority of Supreme Counselor Thraz, you are relieved of command." Morden's compound eyes shifted rapidly between Strix and the incapacitated operatives. "The Consortium will never permit this abomination to exist," he hissed, his natural Packled speech patterns emerging through his chemical treatments. "It violates everything we have preserved for generations." "That," came a new voice from the communication system, "is where you are incorrect, Intelligence Director." The maintenance bay's main view screen activated, displaying the face of Supreme Counselor Thraz himself. The Packled leader's exoskeleton glistened with the formal markings of the highest governmental authority, unmistakable even to human observers. Frank steadied himself against a nearby console, Lara's empathic broadcast gradually receding to manageable levels. The pod's indicators showed her life signs stabilizing, but the unexpected awakening of her abilities had clearly altered something fundamental in her development. "Counselor Thraz," Morden began, "I am implementing security protocol. I am fully aware of what you are implementing, Director," Thraz interrupted. "Just as I am aware that you exceeded your authority by launching this operation without full council approval." Frank exchanged glances with Captain Reynolds, who appeared equally surprised by this intervention. Commander Strix, however, showed no reaction suggesting he might have anticipated this outcome. "The child represents possibilities we cannot dismiss without proper study," Thraz continued. "Scientific progress cannot be subject to fear, a lesson Naira understood better than most." As the Supreme Counselor outlined his vision for continued research and cooperation, Frank felt Lara's pod vibrate gently against his back. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into a steady rhythm, no longer chaotic but purposeful. "Frank," Lara's voice came through the pod's communication system, clear and steady. "I understand now what I am, what Naira wanted." Frank placed his hand against the transparent section of her pod. "What did she want, Lara?" The young Packold's appendages pressed against the inside of the pod, matching his hand position. Her compound eyes locked with his as her exoskeleton displayed patterns of calm certainty. "A bridge," she replied simply. "Between worlds."